So on a race weekend, typically we will have 6 people who are analysing data, and that data is coming straight out of the car, and that's showing there's about 175, 200 sensors on the car, looking at everything from what the engine's doing through to what the chassis is doing, to what the suspension's doing, to what the driver's doing, and everything in between. And we analyse that data. We work out what it is. It's a fairly simple piece of software. Time, distance, and speed. However, you either do it over time, you either do it over distance. We tend to do it over time. Time, it's speed. You'll generate effectively a block graph of speed. You then have your brake. You then have your throttle inputs. You then have steering inputs. You then have chassis rolls. You have damper movements. You'll have what the engine's doing. We pick through that information and we work out what was good, what was bad, what made the car do this, and that is based then off of my feedback. So, for instance, Spencer, my engineer, and Matt, my data engineer, typically the three of us would sit together and we'd go through what the car's doing. So I would say, right, if we were at Donington Park, I'd say, right, you get on the brakes into the first corner, the car does this as it gets in the brakes. As you start to turn in, it does that. As you pick the power up, it does this. And I would feedback, I would want more front end, I'd want the front of the car to grip a little bit more, okay? We would then dive into the data at that one snapshot of corner, and we would look at what the car's doing, how much roll does it have, how much pitch does it have, how much squat does it have, how much, what's the diff doing as we start to pick the power back up, what's the line that I'm driving on, and we really start to delve into the depths of all the finite details of what's happening at that corner, and work out, okay, well, when we were here last year, this was the roll of the car, this was the pitch of the car, this was the squat of the car, the diff was doing that, the rear of the car was doing this. We would compare that to data previous, with sometimes a squint, and this is where machine learning would be good, because it would say, well, Donington Park last year on your fastest lap that you did, these are the settings you used, this was the optimal amount of roll in the car, this was the result it gives you, this is the setup change you should make. That would be perfect if we could then say, well, actually, when we were here at Donington last year, the track temperature was 2 degrees lower, there was a slight headwind, the tyres were 4 laps older. That's where you then need the experience of humans to be able to go, yes, but this was like this, or this was like this. So we'll use our professional insight and knowledge to then give us the answers or changes from there.
And predominantly this is looking back at historical data rather than in the moment data, because the telemetry is downloaded from the car after each session. Even then you're producing vast amounts of data. What are you doing with this? Do you keep it indefinitely, and how do you store it all?
Effectively, yes. So we use the historical data as one of the most powerful tools that we can learn, because we can see what worked in the past. The data that we would be looking through, so the data in the car gets downloaded every single time the car comes into the pit lane. It's just done as a remote, as a hardwired connection. There's 3 ports in the car, I think, 2 ports in the car. One is engine side, one is effectively chassis side as such. They get downloaded, taken onto someone's laptop. They get taken then into the data truck, where then the data is then initially gone through manually to work out if it's a corrupt, if it's a small file, if it's a huge file. Saved to a network server within the truck, named, uploaded, filed, put away from there, for then the rest of the engineers within the team to then access that. So from a internet perspective, we use a Starlink system on our race weekends, then to a network, a network drive effectively that then everyone has access to. So we tend to store that data from as much as we've got, because sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't need it. It's up to you how you see fit and when you want to use it ultimately. But we'll have access to that data within 35 to 40 seconds of when I've got out the car, taken my crash helmet off, had a drink, Spencer and I have walked in the truck, we can click the computer and it's already there. It's instant as much as we need it. But then that is very cool because then the guys who are sat on the pit wall also have access to that server as well. So the team managers or whoever can then also look at that data at the same time. Sat on the pit wall, they've got access to that data as well, so they can see that from the pit wall. The next step for me ultimately would be to have that as live data. As a championship and the regulation, we're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to have live transmittable data. The only data that's transmitted is our hybrid usage in terms of knowing how much we've used on a lap or how much we haven't used. And that has to go to Cosworth, who are the guys that looked after that last year, to know if there's any issues with the car, or if there's not any issues with the car. That was the only live transmittable data. That will be the next step for us, is live telemetry back to the team, who will then be able to study and look at that stuff in real time, but then also give real time and live feedback for me as well. So if I am on circuit and I'm complaining of understeer, the front of the car not gripping at the first corner at Donington Park, as I've gone through that corner on that lap, somebody can, Matt, Spencer, whoever, will be able to analyse that data from the lap previous and then give me that will be the next step that we take moving forwards when the championship allows that regulation to be changed, which hopefully should be the next couple of years. That will be the next big step for us.
And what as the driver can you change in terms of settings or setup in the car as you're on circuit, or does it rely on you going back to the pits? And
we're fairly limited in terms of what we can do. Realistically, the only driver inputs that we can make are things like brake bias or brake positioning. In terms of what we do, anything else is fairly limited. We've got different maps, engine maps and throttle maps and all sorts of bits and pieces. But fundamentally, we're fairly fixed in terms of what we can do. So anything that does get changed will have to be done back within the garage. So every time we go testing, for example, it's a lengthy process of in, out, shake it all about, what works, what doesn't work. So we were testing at in Anglesey just at the end of last season. We did 3 days at Anglesey. So of the 3 days that we were there, and there was just two cars, there was only myself and my teammate Tom. We were the only guys on circuit. I bet we only maybe did 100 laps over the course of the whole day. It doesn't sound, sounds like a lot, but it's actually not a lot at all, because you'll go out, you'll do 3 laps. You'll come in and it might take 20 minutes, half an hour to make a setup change, because you're then going through the data, you'll go out and you'll do another 3 laps, make a setup change, and you'll go again. So you're doing lots of banks of runs, which from a data storage perspective is a nightmare, because the files are split into runs. They're not split into days, they're not split into minutes, they're not split into time. So every single time the car gets switched on, it opens the file, it creates a file. Every time the car gets switched off, it closes the file. Well, if we're doing 100 laps, that's 100 files, sort of 50 files, if you to call it that, of in and out, 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 that then have to be filed and looked through and analysed and marked, and the bits of each part. And that's the hard part, is that within all those files that we've got, there might be one corner on one lap that's better than all the others, but we've got to find it. That's the bit that we struggle with. That's the bit that machine learning would go, there it is. There's the star. You went through that corner more efficiently than any other corner, than you went through that corner on the other 99 laps. Star. Look at that one. That would be perfect case scenario for us. That would be where machine learning would be the best that we could get from it, because that's what we need from it. Not necessarily setup changes, but more just a little asterisk. There you go. Have a look at that. Manually with us, we would have a look into that. That would be where machine learning would be really useful. So
driver coaching AI effectively.
Yes.
That's the difference. The next bit of difference.